Powered by Riverside.
Welcome to our first podcast, Grassroots and Chill. We are alumni from the National Grassroots Organization Results Fellowship. Some background on Results really quickly. It was founded by Sam Dally Harris in 1980 because he wanted to do something to end poverty. We advocate for policies that historically reduce poverty nationally and globally. My name is Tiffany Tagbo. I grew up in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and I work as a crisis contact supervisor at a suicide hotline nonprofit. I also am an advocate with Results, where I focus on poverty, hunger, housing, healthcare, and the policies that affect everyday people. I became an advocate because I know what it feels like to live close to the issues people debate from a distance. I wanted to do more than just talk about the issues. I wanted to actually make a change. And so for me, advocacy gave me a way to turn lived experience and frustration into hope and action.
Hello, everyone. My name is Iribarren, and I am actually a second year fellow with Results. And in the second year, we act as mentors for first year fellows. And I grew up actually in the suburbs of Chicago, but I've been located in San Diego for the past maybe 12 years or so. It's been a while. And I currently work as a financial analyst for a medical services company, but I'm planning on applying to a master's in public health programs this fall to pursue a career in the public sector. And I became an advocate similarly to Tiffany. I really have always had a passion for community service and actually still regularly volunteer locally in San Diego to this day. And I think that interacting with my local community really ignited my drive to give back in other ways as well. So I double majored in political science and sociology at Loyola Marymount University. And there, I didn't just learn about the injustices that marginalized people face, both domestically and abroad, but as well as the tangible means on how to fight against these socio-political systems that do harm folks. So I really became an advocate because I'm not just only driven to use my privilege that I've gained from volunteership and my education, but yeah, as well to just help others. So that's a big reason why I became an advocate.
After hearing each of our stories, one thing is clear. Advocacy does not always start in a political space. Sometimes it starts with lived experience, sometimes it starts with frustration, and sometimes it just starts with seeing something in your community and realizing you can't stay silent about it. That brings us to today's conversation. The Harvard Youth Poll, published in April 2026, shows that many young adults between the ages of 18 and 29 are feeling unheard, economically pressured, disconnected from political leaders, and unsure whether they can actually change the way government operates. Unfortunately, but not surprisingly, this reflects what many young people are already feeling in their daily lives. They're losing faith in politics, questioning whether they are truly represented, and wondering if their voices matter in a system that often feels far removed from their reality. Today, we want to talk about that, not just what young people are feeling, but what we can do with those feelings, how we can move from frustration to action, and how do we move from feeling powerless to recognizing the power we still have. Because regardless of how things look politically, there's always something meaningful we can do. Millennials and Gen Z can make a huge impact in the direction of our country. Your voice matters, your presence matters, and you matter.
Yeah, and Tiffany, that's just such a great way to put it. And I also wanted to quickly add that by the time that this kickoff episode of our new podcast will release, we will be in DC preparing to go to Capitol Hill to talk about things that really do matter to us, to members of Congress and or their staff members face to face. So what a really exciting time to discuss advocacy amongst younger Americans today. First, to kick off our conversation, I wanted to ask, have you, I know that you've written multiple articles on how inflation is affecting families and their ability to make ends meet. So, what insights can you tell us about what this means for us as young adults?
For me, inflation is one of the clearest reasons young people feel like they cannot change the way government operates, because when you are working, trying to pay bills, trying to go to school, trying to raise children, trying to build a future, and you still can't get ahead, it really starts to feel like the system is not listening to you. Inflation is not just about higher prices. It's about feeling that no matter how hard you work, the ground keeps moving underneath you. Groceries are higher, rent is higher, childcare is higher, gas is higher. And for a lot of us young adults, wages have not caught up with real life. So when young people say they don't feel represented, I understand that. Because if leaders truly understood what people were experiencing, we would see more urgency around food, housing, wages, healthcare, childcare, and basic stability policies. But with that said, I also believe this is why advocacy matters. When people feel powerless, the first step is not always changing the whole system overnight. Sometimes that first step is naming what is happening, telling the truth, saying, this is what inflation is doing to my family. This is what policy is doing to my community. This is what I need my government to understand. It may not always feel like power at first, but it is, because silence allows people to make decisions without us, and advocacy forces them to hear from the people living with the consequences.
Yes, absolutely, Tiffany. I think that those are just really well thought out points. And it's really amazing that you can express your frustrations with your lived experiences as well, woven into there, and how that really aligns with the first takeaway from that Harvard Youth poll. And on the topic of the Harvard Youth poll, I personally wanted to mention takeaways 2 to 4. And for listeners, I definitely recommend looking it up and visually seeing the article yourself. It's very fascinating. What I was particularly drawn to from these takeaways that are titled Young Americans Have Little Confidence in the Direction of the Country or the Leaders in Charge. Uh, Takeaway 3 being young Americans favor Democrats in the midterms, but lack confidence in the system itself. And then takeaway 4 being young voters feel disconnected from both parties and are looking for new generation of leadership. Personally, I think that all these excerpts definitely echo the discourse that I've seen and heard both amongst my friends and family who are fellow young adults, but also those online. And specific aspects that also stood out to me were that these points are about the recent approval ratings in the political leadership of our country are both low and actually nearly extinguishable amongst both major political parties. And that actually really surprised me. And from the statistics, it's much different from 2018. The approval ratings are now just very similar amongst the parties in our generation. Basically, no matter what politics you are, it's clearly shows that there's a collapse in confidence in our political leadership in general. And also wanted to quickly add that the poll noted that statistics regarding young voters point towards, and I quote, lower trust in the conduction of the 2026 midterms. And our population is politically shaped more from skepticism than energy. And that young voters across all parties believe that the American system political system prioritizes elites over leaders of our generation that reflect beliefs more in line with our demands. And I just think that these quotes taken from the poll itself really resonate with what I am seeing online and in person. And I particularly wanted to note that because we do live in an increasingly digitized era, that one of the points align with that the online discourse I see amongst younger folks, specifically on TikTok, where I spend most of my time on my phone, is that is it really echoes what the poll is saying. And I should also stress that I've only really noticed these sentiments from those on more left-leaning political spectrum because I'm more so fed videos and content from folks of that side instead of right-wing voices online. So I did want to mention that. But basically, what I see is that most of these political videos, posts, and comments, they villainize all American political figures. And that the idea that participating in our political system is just a waste of time and energy. Basically, these younger netizens of our generation, they think that even if a member of Congress, let's say, does stand for these liberal and progressive values that embolden marginalized Americans, that they are still complicit in perpetuating an essentially flawed and harmful political system. So I just thought that it was important to share these observations I've seen online in particular. Tiffany, I wanted to ask you because I am really eager to know what you particularly think about these observations about what young folks are promoting online that I just discussed.
Absolutely, Emmy. I would like to just add those feelings that the young population is feeling right now are completely valid, and online has become the space where they feel comfortable in sharing those feelings, especially since they believe no one is listening. A lot of young people are not disconnected because they don't care. They're disconnected essentially because they actually do care. They're tired of just feeling like the government does not respond to ordinary people. When we see young people online having these discussions, we have to acknowledge that there is a broken system. And I do not think that we should dismiss that. We should actually ask what made so many young people feel this way, because that frustration usually comes from watching leaders debate issues that are not abstract to us. Food is not abstract, rent is not abstract, student debt is not abstract, healthcare is not abstract, and war is not abstract. These are things that are actually shaping our lives, and these are things that when the older generation are dead and gone, we are going to have to bear the responsibility and live the consequences of the decisions that are being made today. At the same time, what I worry about is when that disappointment turns into withdrawal, because the government does not stop operating just because we stop participating. Decisions still get made, budgets still get passed, programs still get cut, and rights still get debated and reduced. So for me, the question is not, do we trust the systems completely? The question may not be, why do we think so many young people feel the way they do? The question, honestly, is how do we use every tool available to us in any way possible? Voting is a tool, media is a tool, organizing is a tool, storytelling is also one tool, which I love to use. Meeting with members of Congress is a tool. So we can be honest about what is broken and still refuse to give up our voice.
Yes, Tiffany, that's really great. And thank you for that response to my question.
As a young American yourself, what does the thought of the country going in the wrong direction mean to you?
You know what, Tiffany? That's a really excellent question because I actually do subscribe to this belief. Although I have concerns about how our current administration has and will affect the direction of our country, I want to actually contextualize this sentiment in the conversation from my point of view as a young American citizen. And I think that the biggest problem is that the majority of our current political leadership doesn't align with the interest of us younger folks who ultimately will have to endure the lasting effects of their actions and decisions. So, and another issue is that even political leaders who do support our demands are, in my opinion, they're limited in their ability to enact change due to the constraints set up by our American political system that unfortunately does fall on the majority of the leaders. That's how our system's set up. It's really the majority can constrain uh, voices in our government who may support different views. And so, uh, yeah, I think it's just so important for young people to at least vote in upcoming elections, such as the 2026 midterms, because elections, particularly, are our chance to shift the power dynamics in our favor so that more leaders can implement changes we'd like to see. Now that I come to think of it, I did hear that today, when we're recording, which is June 30th, that there was a rebellion amongst a small group of Republican members of Congress and that they, in their actions, halted the political process in a very abrupt way. And that has really limited how our bills and important actions can move forward. I wonder if you wanted to elaborate on today's actions.
Absolutely. This correlates to what we've been talking about when it comes to the young people having power that they don't realize they have. What happened in the House today is a reminder that legislation does not just move forward because people support an issue or because the president wants an issue supported and wants a bill passed for that issue. Leadership controls the path, and when that path is blocked, even major bills can stall before they ever get a vote. We were just speaking about the rebellion in the House, and that actually was because the president wanted the SAFE bill passed. So that brings us to takeaway number 6 from the Youth Harvard poll, which is about concerns the youth have of the president having expanded power. Uh, This takeaway to me connects to the larger feeling that young people don't always trust how power is being used. Rightfully so. I mean, when people already feel like the government does not listen to them, expanding presidential power can feel even more concerning. And with the Supreme Court vote, that is essentially what was done. The presidential powers were actually expanded, which has many people upset. And so it raises the question, if ordinary people already feel unheard, what happens when even more power is concentrated at the top? That's why checks and balances matter. That's why Congress matters. This is why the courts also matter. That is why our voices matter, all voices, because democracy is not supposed to depend on one person or one demographic making decisions for everyone. For young people, I believe the concern is not just one president or one administration. It's about whether the structure of government still gives people meaningful ways to be heard. If young people feel like the leaders can ignore them, bypass them, or make decisions without accountability, that deepens the belief that participation does not matter. And that is very dangerous because democracy, again, depends on people believing their voice still matters. And it depends on people taking action to make a change and standing up for what they believe in. That leads us to takeaway number 7, also the use of national emergency language. Recently, within these past few years, national emergency language has emerged as a concern, especially when we talk about it being used against specific demographics, like used to expel people from the country because of the belief that our country is being overran by immigration. And to speak to that point, I also believe young people are paying attention to the way political language gets used. When leaders are calling something a national emergency, young people are asking, emergency for whom? Who's being protected? Who's being blamed? And more importantly, who gets more power because of this? Those kind of questions matter. It shows really that young people are not apathetic. They're watching, they're analyzing, they're trying to understand whether government is actually responding to real harm or really just using fear to justify more control. And again, this goes back to the bigger theme of the poll. Young people want to know if government is something they can influence or if decisions are just being handed down to them after powerful people have already made up their minds. So I believe the challenge is not that young people do not care about democracy. I believe many of them deeply care. They just need evidence that democracy still cares about them.
Hmm. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely agree. I also really thought that that was particularly a great takeaway that they included in the poll. And I believe that I wanted to touch on the last takeaway that was included in the poll. And a quote from it is that half of young Americans now agree that the statement, people like me don't have any say about what the government does. And this is actually up 15 points from 2017. Notably, this sentiment does cross party lines. It shows that we have, again, like I said earlier, we've lost faith in the government. We, as the younger generation, has faith in the government and believe that all politicians have more selfish reasons to be in political leadership. Why do we feel this way? I wanted to echo the sentiments I said earlier, and I think that my points of view actually, from my observations, does resonate with a lot of younger people, which is that our system is constructed in such a way that makes it easier for those who have maybe a stronger financial background, who have connections with those already in power to stay in power and perpetuate certain systems that can keep marginalized people marginalized, won't let bills and laws be passed that can uplift folks who really need change to survive, to support their families. And it's incredibly frustrating. So I think that that's a really big reason why change is so needed and that younger voices in positions of power is so essential. So again, I want to really stress that everyone listening should go and vote in the 2026 midterms. They should just keep voting because this is so crucial to make this power shift.
Absolutely. Voting is really the cornerstone of democracy. So that is very important. In order for people to make a change, you do really need to go vote. From my point of view, the takeaway from this is probably the heart of the whole conversation for me. When young people say people like me do not have any say about what the government does, that is not just a statistic, that's a warning. It means people are looking at government and not seeing themselves. They're looking at policy debates and not hearing their lives reflected. They're looking at elected officials and wondering like whether anyone in power actually understands what it costs to survive right now. And honestly, I understand that feeling. There are times when it feels like ordinary people have to fight just to be considered. But what advocacy has taught me is that being ignored is not the same as being powerless. Just want you guys to sit with that for a
Mm.
moment. Being ignored is not the same thing as being powerless. If we were truly powerless, they would not care whether we vote. They would not care whether we organize. They wouldn't care whether we write letters, meet with congressional offices, tell our stories, or bring attention to what is happening in our communities. So the fact that public pressure matters means we still have power. So the challenge is helping young people see that power before hopelessness convinces them to stop using it. And so that leads us to a lot of what we were just talking about. What can you do today when it comes to making sure that your voice gets heard and you have a say in this government?
Right. And what really pops to the foreground of my mind is utilizing media, because I think that that's really underscored in the younger generation. I think that stressing voting, which is very important, is sometimes people's only idea of how they can participate in the political system or can advocate in the political system. But the media is really a strong way to hold those in power accountable, to promote and educate others about anti-poverty or other social injustices that you want to see changed in our world. I think that a really great way to get your voice heard is by writing a letter to the editor. And I think a really good hack and a quick and easy way to do this is to go to actually the Action Center on results.org, which will provide you with templates for certain anti-poverty focused letter to the editor pieces. I think that's a really great low impact way to start. Tiffany, do you have any ideas on how listeners can participate?
Yes, absolutely. I believe what young people can do today is what they're already doing. Use social media. I mean, we've seen the power of social media when we see a lot of trends pop up. It's seen in pop culture right now. You know, songs from 10 and 20 years ago are going viral because young people are starting to listen to it. They're sharing it, they're promoting it. And so I would say, even if you don't want to use the traditional media, like writing a letter to the editor, definitely use social media because politicians are paying attention, and that's one way that's very effective to get your point of view out in the open, and it's one way to actually promote civic engagement and make a change in the things that our government is doing today.
So true. It's a really great way to participate because we live in an increasingly online world, and that's a huge means of education and getting your voice heard. I think that a really fitting way to conclude today's episode is to emphasize a powerful quote from the Huey Newton, which is, "The revolution has always been in the hands of the young. The young inherit the revolution." So, everyone, I hope that you enjoyed our discussion today. And please make sure to tune into future episodes of Grassroots and Chill for more discussions surrounding young voices in advocacy.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Powered by Riverside.